A critical dam collapse triggers evacuations in war-torn Ukraine, and the Air Force offers to pay up to keep pilots. All of that and more today, June 7th, 2023. Good morning, Early Birds. I'm Jonathan Lehrfeld, and this is the Early Bird Brief, produced by Defense News and Military Times. First up, a major dam in southern Ukraine collapsed yesterday. The collapse triggered floods. It also threatens to contaminate water supplies. Both sides in the war, Ukraine and Russia, scrambled to evacuate residents and blamed each other for the destruction. Ukraine accused Russian forces of blowing up the Kakhovka Dam and hydroelectric power station in an area that Moscow controls. In remarks provided by the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry, Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba said Russia needs to pay for attacking the dam.
Ukraine calls an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council and brings the issue of the Russian terrorist act to the International Atomic Energy Agency's Board of Governors. We will also cooperate with the EU Civil Protection Mechanism and other international mechanisms to mitigate consequences and bring Russia to account.
Russian officials blamed Ukrainian bombardment in the contested area for the collapse. It was not possible to verify the claims. Officials raced to check cooling systems at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and authorities expressed concern about supplies of drinking water to the south in Crimea. Russia illegally annexed that peninsula in 2014. Both Russian and Ukrainian authorities brought in trains and buses for residents. About 22,000 people live in areas at risk of flooding in Russian-controlled areas, and 16,000 live in the most critical zone in Ukrainian-held territory. Here's why it matters. It was not immediately clear whether either side benefits from the damage to the dam. The damage could hinder Ukraine's counteroffensive in the south and distract its government. Russia also has a stake in the dam's collapse, as it depends on the dam to supply water to Crimea. At this time, the UN's International Atomic Energy Agency said there was no immediate risk to safety of the power plant. While the plant's reactors are shut down, they still need water for cooling. Inspectors said the reservoir could be empty in a few days, but alternate sources can provide water for some months. The World Data Center for Geoinformatics and Sustainable Development estimated that nearly 100 villages and towns would be flooded. Another important story, Singapore's defense minister is warning that, without checks in place, increased military spending could create issues. Defense Minister Ng Eng Hen spoke at the annual Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore this past weekend. Ng said the military spending itself is not troublesome. However, he noted that without diplomacy and restraint, such spending could lead to regional arms races. Ng acknowledged that defense spending is core to deterrence. The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute says global military spending rose 19% from 2013 to 2022 and has grown every year since 2015. The Swedish-based think tank found the world spent $2.2 trillion on defense last year. Singapore spent $11.7 billion of that. The minister also called for Japan to improve relations with China for the sake of regional stability. Ng said there are still feelings in Asia, especially in China, that there was no accountability for Japan's actions during World War II, like that of Germany. In 1931, China lost the region of Manchuria. Imperial Japan invaded and occupied large parts of Chinese territory between 1937 and 1945. Last year, Japan spent $46 billion on defense, while China spent an estimated $292 billion. The Japanese military also occupied Singapore from 1942 to 1945. Ties between their defense forces have steadily improved in recent years. Ng met his Japanese counterpart at the dialogue. Both countries also signed an agreement concerning the transfer of defense equipment and technology over the weekend. A defense ministry statement said this provides the Singapore Armed Forces with more options to meet its training and operational requirements. In other news, Air Force pilots can now earn up to $50,000 a year in bonus pay under a pair of programs designed to keep aviators in uniform. For more on pilot retention efforts, senior Air Force Times reporter Rachel Cohen breaks it all down for us.
So, Rachel, thank you for joining the podcast today. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me.
There's the possibility of really hefty enticements for pilots who stay in the Air Force. What are they looking at in terms of these big benefits?
So they've, they're boosting it quite a bit. The cap used to be $35,000 per year for people who, decide to extend. For pilots, extend past their initial 10-year commitment. For air battle managers and combat systems operators, who are, some of the people that work in the back of the plane, doing things like, targeting and, operating all the bells and whistles that are on some of these planes, their initial commitment is 6 years. So if you decide to extend, you can get, as much as $50,000 per year up to 12 years, so that's a pretty large chunk of change. If you're looking at up to $600,000 in bonus pay, so that's on top of your regular money that you'd get on top of, combat pay if you're deployed, things like that. So there's two separate programs now that you can opt into. One was created by Congress to try and get more of these, rated officers. So people, rated positions basically are people who can fly a plane or people in those key positions in the back of the plane. If you sign up or if you renew your contract within the last, you can't wait until your last year. So if you do it a year or two before your contract is going to expire, you can get $200,000 over 4 years. So that's one program that's starting this year. And then the other one is a more, long-term, will let you, stay for another, 3 to 12 years. And that gets a lot more rewards, but they're phasing that out. So starting next year, it's going to be, highest amount of money you can get is $50,000 per year. If you don't wait until the last year to re-up. If you do wait until the last year, you'll get a lesser amount of money. It might still be $35,000 as the cap. They haven't really announced that yet. So yeah, it's, they're really leaning into monetary benefits.
So why such the urgency to retain pilots? Are they struggling to retain and recruit, or is it one or the other for the service?
Right now, the impetus really is to retain the people that they have. It's not as difficult to get people in the door to train to be pilots, but what they have more trouble doing is keeping people, past that 10-year mark. When you've already gotten 10 years of experience, you've got people in those, sort of middle management kinds of jobs, or middle tier leadership kinds of jobs. They don't want to lose those, right? That's important experience, important skills that those people are bringing. But, people can make a lot of money at airlines. People, often want life with a little more flexibility than what the military has offered. That, the wars overseas are winding down. We're out of Afghanistan. It's a small footprint in Iraq and Syria and things like that. Pilots just aren't flying as much anymore. And so a lot of them are looking at opportunities to, go into the civilian world and do that for, more money, less kind of bureaucracy, less paperwork, and try something new.
Thanks, Rachel. For more conversations like that one, please like and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Also on the radar for today, the historic nomination of the Department of Veterans Affairs Deputy Secretary could be held up over a senator's whistleblower protection complaints. Republican Senator Chuck Grassley is expressing concerns that VA Chief of Staff Tanya Bradshaw is in part responsible for failing to safeguard whistleblowers' identities from their bosses, a long-promised reform to the VA's internal messaging system. At issue is VA's Integrated Enterprise Workflow Solution System. It's used by department officials to track all correspondence. Last year, an Office of Special Counsel report found that information on that system is not adequately secured. That could lead to whistleblowers' confidential communications with senior staff and lawmakers being uncovered by senior staffers who wish to retaliate against them. Administration officials ordered fixes to be made by early fall 2022. Grassley's office noted, though, that more than 10 months later, that investigation remains incomplete. Grassley wants explanations for that delay, as well as how officials will better protect that personal information and what Bradshaw's role has been in pushing for improvements. Here's why it matters. Grassley held up the nomination of VA Undersecretary of Benefits Joshua Jacobs earlier this year over similar whistleblower protection complaints. Grassley has not yet threatened to hold up Bradshaw's nomination. But it's possible that could change if he isn't satisfied with the answer she provides. If confirmed, Bradshaw would be the first woman of color ever to hold the second highest leadership post in VA. And now here are some other stories that we're hearing chirps about. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and Army General Mark Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, participated in the 79th anniversary of D-Day yesterday in Normandy, France. A few Boston outlets are reporting that Massachusetts Air National Guardsman Jack Teixeira, who's accused of leaking top-secret military documents, has a new attorney who represented a Guantanamo Bay detainee. Ukraine branded Russia a, quote, terrorist state yesterday to open hearings in a case against Russia's 2014 annexation of Crimea at the top UN court. Iran unveiled yesterday what it calls a hypersonic missile able to beat air defenses amid tensions with the U.S. It comes as the U.S. said it is sanctioning a group of people and firms from Iran, China, and Hong Kong associated with the alleged development of Iran's ballistic missile program. And Military.com is reporting that the Department of Veterans Affairs improperly spent or lost more than $3.5 billion in fiscal year 2022. And on this day in history, in 1942, the Battle of Midway ended. The U.S. Navy's decisive victory over Japan turned the tide in the war in the Pacific Theater. That's it for us this morning. To get more of the top stories and breaking news, go to defensenews.com/EBB to subscribe to the Early Bird Brief newsletter. If you liked what you heard, give us a like wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to follow us on social media at @defense_news and @Military Times. Also, please rate us and be sure to leave a comment. The Early Bird Brief is hosted by me, Jonathan Lehrfeld, and produced by Zimone Z. Perez. Today's episode features stories by The Associated Press, Mike Yao, Rachel Cohen, and Leo Shane III. Our editor-in-chief is Mike Gruss. Have a great day.